everything that it stands for. And of course, because Venus is in its upside down position, meaning that according to how planets, like you see Uranus is on its side, Venus is actually upside down, giving us the symbol of an actual inverted pentagram. But again, understand that these precessions have a lot to do with calculating time on the ocean and the sea. And the reason why this becomes important for any seafaring people such as the Phoenicians or anyone who came from space or across the seas, because remember, most of the ancient people thought that the earth was flat, the indigenous that were living here, because it appeared as flat when they looked out upon it. So the only people who really knew that the earth was round was those who traveled the seas. In order to travel the seas, you had to have a high level of nautical capability. And that nautical capability came from utilizing the Venus, the Venusian pentagram and the progression of Venus. And so this, of course, is one of the roots to why Venus is worshipped heavily, especially because the people who are instilling all the belief systems of worship actually used the tool, the compass rose, the rose itself, as it meaning sub rosa. At times is the terminology that they use, meaning under the rose, but rose, the red rose is a symbolism for Venus. So what you'll also find is this particular symbol in Sumerian is very important for us to remember now. It is where we get all of this 8-pointed star symbolism on the hierarchy of the world, the so-called controllers, as I call them. And they wear a great deal of this, as we'll see later on, this kind of regalia with this 8-pointed star on it, which is known as the star of the Ilu, which comes from Babalu, which is, of course, the first civilized city, or when civilization moved into that sphere of the world. So let's keep going here. As you can see, it's really going to get intense as we start breaking this down. But as you see here, the compass rose itself is a major symbol used to denote being able to travel the sea. So this again goes with the information that I just released to you about how Venus was synonymous with trekking the sea. And later on, when this starts to become synonymous with trekking the sky, meaning that an individual is supposedly in a spaceship and cruising around, you can see that this symbolism is still used. Okay. Now, another thing about the precession of Venus, because she's known as the Queen of Heaven, because she goes around all of the stars, the major stars and planets at a certain point in a certain conjunction. And this is known to be like a mating to the ancient people. This was the actual merging between spirit and another spirit, which is symbolized by the Sri Yantra, or symbolized by what we call the Megan star or the hexagram. So what you'll find with this symbolism is even the most ancient cultures, which you'll still find that Islam is a part of, use the symbolism that is related to the crescent moon and then the star, the pentagram, which is actually Venus. You'll find here, of course, this is Hafifa, I believe it's Abu Hafifa, which was the cherub that Muhammad rode on to the celestial mansions, as it's recorded in the text before the Quran. But as you see here again, the crescent moon and the pentagram. We find here also an ancient picture of Venus before it was degraded into the woman with the red dress with the lipstick. Venus was originally seen as a very voluptuous woman because all of the entities that existed back then, especially the Nephilim, were very large. So in order to come out of the womb of their mother was seen as being very large to be able to carry them. So there was never really any idea in the beginning of Venus being some type of like a porn star, porn queen, or something of this nature, which has been turned into now. You also find here again, this tassel was also the same bust, or one of the, the Venus of Lascaux was one of the oldest, inscriptions or engravings or carvings of Venus. And you notice something here right off the bat if you're really paying attention. You see here the horn, of course, which we can see why that symbolism is present later on when we get into what are the real stories of what's happened here on Earth. But notice also the elongated skull. and even the skull that appears to be somewhat reptilian-like. And this is something that I believe connects to what we now call the hive mind queen. We find these elongated skulls as not being something very exclusive, but being found all around the world. And in many cases, when they're located, of course, they're being worshipped by the people that are there. And those people say that they were the actual skulls of the first fathers and mothers that were here on the planet. And everyone has to also remember there were mothers. Why they give the story of the Nephilim and the Rephaim or the giants so much, they never talk about the female giants or the Amazons, which fought alongside of man and woman at times, which even became cloaked under the symbol of the Valkyrie. But what you're dealing with here, again, is elongated skulls, which show an excessive pineal gland, meaning a larger pineal gland, and also a fully developed lobe, meaning that the reason why the human mind is so small at times is because actually the size of the cranium being somewhat premature. And that's why a lot of the indigenous people would attempt to shape their heads into the heads of what they called their brothers and sisters that are arrived from the sky, or this was synonymous with the sea. And my knowledge has led me to believe that they came from the center of the world, because that is actually the womb of this world, is the center of the world. And this, of course, is contrary to many people looking out in space for something. But I can see any organic, as you'll see with a woman, the baby comes from the womb. So anything that is coming into this planet will actually emerge from the center of this planet and then come on to land from that direction. And of course, this gives us a good insight into Hyperborea and Shambhala, etc. But what we find here is we find a glyph that is very rare to obtain. In fact, I know this entire lot was destroyed. I was able to extract it from a museum site and begin to start pulling apart a lot of the symbolism that is here. But I only want to bring light to really briefly the elongated skulls. This actual glyph or artifact is something that I call the arrivals, which is something where you can see that man, or what would be man and woman, are located here, and their stature is about to the size of the feet, or to the top of the legs of these beings. So this lets us know that as far as stories of them being the creators, what would really happen here is you could see that we were already created in a sense. They did arrive here, and this began an evolutionary process. And so that's what we see as the arrivals. And this is still, again, the Atlantean Empire. I'm yet to cover the Lemurian Empire, which came before this actual arrival of, obviously, the Anunnaki, Ari or Ario, aristocracy, archaeology, architecture. The R is what you would be dealing with here. Also, you see, again, the symbolism is replete. We have the pentagram, and this, of course, is something from Egypt. And we see that there's an interfacing going on between this god and Venus, which is the pentagram. So we see that when you understand this priestcraft, you can really interpret all of the symbols of what is being shown that normally doesn't make sense to most people. We find the original idea of the Black Madonna. Venus was always seen as black. As I said, it's Aphrodite, which is where we get our word Afro from. And then the child, of course, who's Amor, which is the Latin word for love. The Latin word for berry. Love. Amor, which is, of course, connects to Roma and Rome and Venus. Venus's child, which is, of course, the word Roma means black or more. So when this whole system flips, now remember, we're still talking about humanity's slavery, but when the whole system flips, all we get is a extrapolation or interpolation or polarization or inversion of these colors. So you'll see later on the white Madonna and child, and this, of course, Madonna is synonymous with Mary, Eve, even Lilith as far as the nighttime character. And then, of course, the child is synonymous with Christ and Tammuz and Damuz and all the rest of the saviors and messiahs. Because what you're actually dealing with here is you're dealing with an entire system of knowledge that is built to enslave the individuals that accept the knowledge. And you'll see that over time, even though most people getting involved in this don't admit it and have gotten themselves involved so deep in searching for being special and famous and things of that nature that they have become completely entangled by it. And that's, of course, where this big activation is coming from next year, is many people are not only have become untangled, but or will also become untangled because the truth is really out and there's nothing that can be done about that. Now, we still find here a very well-known image. We have yet to find out if this is truly authentic, but it's clearly a copy, if not an identical description of, once again, the Madonna or Mary or Venus or Anna. That's another name, Anna, carrying the child, but again, in the reptilian caricature or character. And of course, this would match up to Lasso with the elongated skulls here. So I would definitely say that we would need to consider, especially when we go through the Lemurian part of all of this, what kind of bipedal beings were actually existing here that were also intelligent. Meaning that I think that we're playing ourselves when we think that every being that has come across this planet that was intelligent looked like a human in the face. And of course here, this picture's been cut off a little bit, but there's a pentagram that's on the top of the head. This, of course, is pulled from Egypt. And you see also the flute in the hand, which we'll get into the flute symbolism and being able to tame the serpent later on. But again, if that pentagram was there, you would just see the redundification of the idolism. So what you also find, and this is where we're going to start talking about the other side to this, is that obviously the pentagram is a symbol for flesh and creating things in a physical reality using the spiral force, or what we call phi. And that knowledge of creation into the physical reality equals a great level of manifestation, obviously. Also, we'll find that these type of symbols are not exclusive to the occult. They're found in nature. So before we would adapt that the pentagon is something that Pythagoras cooked up, we would have to first admit that nature shows it within things such as pyrite. And of course, many of the things that have the phi base geometry are related to the pentagram, but the organic pentagram, which is the one with the curves, and you'll see why that's so important later on. But we'll also see that there's this ongoing volley back and forth between what I call 5 versus 6, because 5 is a symbol of the flesh and 6 is actually a symbol of the spirit. Then what we have is when flesh unites with spirit, we get the actual composite of the human being, meaning we're actually mixed with flesh and spirit. So there's definitely something very magnificent going on with why we can maintain in fleshly stance and then also in spiritual stance in real time in both bodies. And that's what's been known as the great work. And so, of course, many men, women, gods, goddesses, kings, queens, etc. have been trying to duplicate that knowledge of being able to do the great work, to manifest something that is so expansive that it has no limit, that it just continues to spawn. Notice how humanity is continuously spawning, showing that if you're talking about energy and production, this is a great thing. While the world is bent to think that, oh, if we don't stop expanding or if we don't stop growing, then this will become our problem. Actually, it's our solution. The immense level of energy that we have, we're able to harness, and it continues to grow. So when I get into explaining a lot of the symbolism, I want everyone to realize that these symbols are found in nature first. And it's only man, woman, gods, goddesses, demigods, you name it, that keep trying to use it. And oftentimes, because of greed, ego, and all of the darkness of ignorance, there's a convolution. We'll just use that word. So let's keep going here. So of course now we're here at 6, as we just left 5, which is obviously Venus. And 6, of course, is when I say flesh and spirit, some people would also try to say flesh, or feminine and masculine, and that wouldn't be correct. 6 is not a masculine number in the sense that two interlacing triangles or two interlacing fields of energy coming into contact would create energy. So they would have to be opposing poles.